Okay. We started last week, and we'll pick up again about the mitzvah of Nesias Owen. Second. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Mitzvahs, a mitzvah for Arba Ushloshim. Each etzivonu kshiyisu hakohanim ha'oloin al kitveim kisveim kishi nirtze loseisoi. So that I pointed out just before we get started. I saw in Frankel's Ram that some of the Achronim say that it's only because Al Pi Hashem there's a mitzvah. Went back and forth. I don't know. You look there, you see. But the Ram is very clear over here that the mitzvah is whenever we want to move it. And we point out also this Mimokum the Mokim is in addition from the Ibn Tibbon added, it's not in Ksaviyadka because it's not in neither Ibn Eov and in Kapach. And there might be something very important here. And I'm just going to make reference, and then we will talk about it a little more later, or maybe next time, whatever, we'll see. Yeah. Yeah, it should be here. I'm reading a line from Kadisha Gam Vagrid, Perek Beis of Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, Haloch Beis. Okay? And the line is like this. It's on page Chavov, not sure, maybe it was republished, I'm not sure, just the one that's in front of me. It says like this. Venire, it's in the paragraph that starts V'af. It's the last paragraph of the piece. Venire, de b'mikdosh, mimokum l'mokoim, lekedin shel nesiyah. The chalos nesiyah eino elo chutz l'mikdosh. So then the word mimokum l'mokoim has a whole new meaning, new vista. והכוח במקדש עצמו לשייך כל דין כותב. וחוץ למקדש, okay. The Rav needed this for his shtickle Torah. There's no hechach per se to say this, but in order for his shtickle Torah to jive, he needs to make this assumption, okay? And I assume this is the way he's interpreting the word mimokum l'mokum. Okay, to say that, but it's an interesting thing. And then, this opens up like a new avenue of questions. One could ask, if the Bayis HaShebona Shloimoi, Mitachas Matmunis Akarka, is actually part of Mikdash. So when they brought the Aron to its Mokum Geniza, or they take it back, maybe there's no Masa. And this will be very interesting, okay? Because there are those, as we'll go through it, that that there was masa. It's going to be lost. Lovely maybe there, but according to this, there's no masa. Masa is only outside of Mikdash. And that's what he lives in Mokum Mokum. Here the Ram does not say Mokum Mokum. In Mishnah Torah he has it. V'hu Amar Yisale ki avodas hakotef avodas hakodesh aleihem b'kosef Yis'u. So Ram has an apology. We'll solve it. V'af al pi shezeh hatzivui bol alavim beisahi, and that's only Hirasha. And I assume that he learns the same way that Lo Yavoid Oid is Hirasha, as he says in Shiur Shlishi. Who adin the Bakosev Yisro, because of the Lo Yavoid Oid is only a midbar according to Ram and Shiur Shlishi. So this also is a rasha. V'af al pi shezeh hatzivui bol alavim b'eisahi omnam hoyizeh lemiyut mispar kohanim bizman hahu ki Aaron hu arosh omnam l'deres hakohanim chayovim b'mitzvah, but this adrabah v'heim yisu'u. So there is a mitzvah l'deres, and the mitzvah is l'kohanim, but the mitzvah Leviim was a rasha. In fact, he says, Ukfia nira. Oh, he says like this. I'm reading on page Ayin Zayin, the second paragraph of Omnom. V'Rambam l'taimei the svil deires nesias ha'oren he bekohanim ubekohanim lo'nemar din shonim ve'al kein kol choshev lahalav v'lo yavoid b'chlal mitzvah. And the Ramban learns that it's a mitzvah. Ramban chilek gam bezeh v'seva the gam al kohanim ikalav develo yavoid oid nesias ha'oren kivin the ikloy me'avodas levia v'lo nemo. Okay, cool. But according to the Rambam, b'chol zeh poshet u'mavur lehedya b'divreihem sham. And this is according to the Rambam that the mitzvah is a mitzvah on Kohanim l'deires, but in midbar is a mitzvah on Levim, and the same way that there's no lav lo yavud oid, which is a mitzvah l'shah, uadin the mitzvah of bakotev yisu of Levim is also l'shah, but bakotev yisu of Kohanim is l'deires. That l'chera is what's happening. Okay? Now, so here, again, let's just start. Again, there are two questions. Let's just start over again. That on our problems to Rambam. Why Bakotev Yisu in the pasuk refers to the whole Mishkan? And the Ram says the mitzvah And certainly in Midbar, the mitzvah was on the whole Mishkan, on Kol Masa B'nei Kos, Shekoil Menorah, it includes Menorah, Shulchan Mizbachos, V'Shakli Shalos. So the Chayyim should have said, the mitzvah l'deres is all Kli Shalos. In fact, the mitzvah Midrash Chinuch asked this question. And that we pointed out that according to the Ram Midbar, the mitzvah is on the sea. So on the Deres, the mitzvah is in Midbar, the mitzvah was on Levium, and the Deres, the mitzvah is Kohanim. Now, that is l'cheira. What's just the simple, just to get the pieces down straight. And amidst Shem, as time goes on, we mentioned a little bit. We'll talk about the Griz in Chedushei Griz, Alevi al Ramam in the Michtavim, Odo Hey Tafresh Pei Beis, Serve their Masker V'Hoyanira, and which is the letter to the Rav, and the Rav Shtickle in the Gamba Gid and Peri Beis Alachir Beis. Amidst Hashem, we'll talk more about it. Now, we pointed out last week, let's go over it again, that the Ram is putting this in the middle of Mitzvah Mikdash, and l'cheira he means that the Aron is part of Mikdash. And that's what he clearly says in Moran Nevuchim. But however, the Ram in Beis Bechir Perek Aleph Halacha Vav, and my Rebbe has a piece in Igus Agrid Alevi there that the Nusach and Rambam, at least that he found in Ksav Yad Berlin, but later it became really that it's really in most of the Kisv Yad. Then it wasn't in the Tfus that Shiva Kalim in Mikdash, and all is not one of the Shiva Kalim, which are part of the Ikar Mikdash. Okay. Now, let's go on. We discussed the Rambam Shita that the mitzvah is on Kohanim, l'deres, and in Midbar was on Levium. However, the strange thing, even though it makes a big deal about this here, the whole discussion about Kohanim is only here in Sefer HaMitzvos. Sefer HaMitzvos proper. But if you look in the Minyan Mitzvah Kotzer, he writes, Lo seisa Aron ala הכתף כשנושאין oisai, שנאמר בכתף יסוד. No mention of Kohanim. In Protei Mitzvos, in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash v'Oivnei Bo, Lo seisa Aron ala הכתף. No mention of who carries it. In Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, Peri Beis Alachir Beis, he writes, Be'esh Shemelichin es ha'Aron mimokom lamokom, ein melichin oisai lo ala behemo v'lo ala golos ulefi sheshochach dov v'nosai ala gola niflotz peretz b'uza elo mitzvah lenot lo ala kotev shnemo ki avodas hakodesh aleim b'kotev yisod. But there's no mention at all of Kohanim. So l'cheira, the Ram changed his mind, and he doesn't assume that the mitzvah is Kohanim, and he leaves it blank, which the Mitzvah will talk about. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit. I'm just confused about this. The one Aron, two Aron. What was in the Aron? I'll just give you some ideas, but I think the more important is that if there's another Aron, is the mitzvah of Masa on the other Aron also. Or which Aron is there mitzvah Masa? Tesefta in Mesechah Sefer, Perek Zayin Halacha Yudches, Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish Omer, Shnei Aronos Hoyu, Echad Shiotza Imohen LeMuchamo. There were two Aronos. The Echad Sheshorui Imohen B'Machane. So there's one Aron that went out in Muchamo, and there's one Aron that was constantly stayed with them in the Machne. Sheyetze Imon Muchamo Choye Sefer Torah. That which went out in Muchamo had a Sefer Torah in it. Shenema V'aroin Bris Hashem Nosa Lifnehem V'goymer וזה ששורי עמוהם במחנה, זה שהיו בו לוחס ושבעי לוחס. According to Sefer, both the luchos and the shivei luchos were in the Aron which was in Mikdash. But it's very clear, and they say, Shenema va'aroin bris Hashem u'Moshe lo yimoshu mikera machne. It always stayed there. So there's one that went out, and there's one that stayed. But the luchos and the shivei luchos were in the Aron that stayed. But it's clear there's a machos of Tanoim. If there were two Aronos or one, I don't know if I should talk about this, but I'll give you my mokoim. The Ramban Chumash in Dvorim Yud Posek Aleph seems to discuss the issue of one Aron and two Aron, and he seems that according to the Yishalmi, and he's machri like that the Rabbanan hold that there was only one Aron. In Mishnah Torah, there's no mention whatsoever of a second Aron. Interesting, because Rav talks about back a discussion about two Aronis. The Rav, not in this piece, he talks about a Aron going out in Muhammad, and he quotes the Mount Sefer, which is an interesting, and Machne, whatever it is, but he doesn't talk about two Aronis, but in a different place in Igros Agrid, he does talk about it. But the more important issue is, if there are two Aronis, is there mitzvah masa on the second Aron? So Biskarov assumes that if there are two Aronis, even on the second Aron, there's a mitzvah of masa. and it's Daf Galidei. And we just have to understand whether it's and Biskarov assumes that it's Ayidei Kohanim. It could have been anything. It could have been you don't need Masa, and it could be you don't need Kohanim, but Biskarov assumes that you need both. Now, just going back before, just to keep you for your edification, the Bavli and the Yerushalmi seem to be a machlekes whether the Aron actually went out in Milchama. According to the Deya, according to the Tzad, there was only one Aron. If there were two Aronis, so, the Sefer, there's no problem. One went out in Milchama. But if there's only one Aron, did the Aron ever go out in Milchama? So, the Yerushalmi in Sefer assumes that it didn't go out in Milchama. And the Bavli in Sefer Mem Gimel and Aleph assumes that it went out l'milchama. Question is, what's the machne? And you look at the sugis; it's beyond our purview now. But whatever it is, Biscovi doesn't get involved. Bavli Yerushalmi, the amazing Ram doesn't say anything. So Chayli's passing like the Yerushalmi, or there's only one Aron, and he doesn't talk about it going out in Milchama. Even though the Bavli seems to say that the Aron went out in Milchama, the Rav in his piece talks about the Aron going out in Milchama and he quotes the Gemara, but the Ram never mentions it. And according to Yerushalmi, it didn't go out. Okay, next. Now, let's start trying to explain things. The Rambam, let's start with Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah, I think, is simpler, maybe. The Rambam Mishnah Torah, in Perek Beis, Alchid Beis, Bo'eis shemolichin es ha'aron mimokom l'mokom, ein molichin oisei lo ha'behema, v'lo ha'agolois, ela mitzvah l'notloi al hakotef. So the two principles in the Rambam, the mitzvah which we alluded to before, that the mitzvah is only the Siyas Ha'aron and not Sha'ar Kli Shores. And in Mishnah Torah, there's no mention of Siyas Ha'aron of Kohanim and Levim. L'chayra, it's B'chol Adam. So in Mishnah Torah, you have to ask the question, and we'll see later, we'll see about over here, but let's just get started in Mishnah Torah. Why is the mitzvah only on Aron and not on Sha'ar Kli Shores? And this kasha, the Minchas Chinuch is the kasha in Shinayin Tes. And it's also mafurish in the pasuk that the mitzvah of Maaseh Zayidei Levim. And how did the Rambam not talk about Kohanim and Levim in Mishnah Torah? So, here in Sefer Mitzvah, you have a problem with how it changed and why it changed and how can it change. But in Mishnah Torah, it It's changing, I guess. It's to all of them, but the Rambam, we also don't know how that happened. So, as far as the first question, the Minchas question, why is it on the Oren and not a Shakli Sharis? So the Rav, in his piece, says the following, that conceptually it could be on anything. Lav dafka Oren could be all Klisharis. But the mitzvah requires that which you're carrying to have a name of Klei HaMikdash or something like that. And the problem is a Klisharis outside of the Mikdash loses a Shem Klisharis. It doesn't operate, it doesn't have a Shem Klisharis on it. It's only Klisharis in the Mikdash, whereas Aron has a name of Aron even outside the Mikdash. And he brings a raya that Aron has a Shem even outside the Mikdash from the fact that there was Hitzas Aron L'Melchama. In other words, he works the Gemara site. He doesn't point out that the Ram doesn't quote it, and he says that you see that there's a Hoitzah or Masa Oren b'Shas Melchama, so it means that Oren has a Shem Oren even outside of Mikdash. And another raya, there's a Lav Asor Sabadim on all from the Oren. So that Lav is even outside the Mikdash. So it means without a Shem Oren, there's no Lav. So it must have a Shem Oren even outside the Mikdash. And that's what he quotes the Rambam in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash. Perek Beis Halacha Yud Gimel. כשנושאין Aseh, which means the Aron, al הכתף וכולי, ונסהורין שלו ישמטו עבדים מן הטבעויות, שהמסר אחד מן הבדים ומן הטבעות לא יקר. שנאמר בטבעות הארון היו עבדים לא יסעו ממנו. And this he assumes is any place. Yushalmi, you should look at Yushalmi also if you want to understand this a little better. Yushalmi Tzaita Per Ches Halacha Gimel. Now, next. Okay. Now, that was as far, and you have to understand, that's where the Rav adds that within the Mikdash is no Masa. Or Mitzvah Bakotet in Mikdash. Because if there would be, his whole teretz falls off. He's defining, because then you could have imagined the Shem, Chal Hashem Klishor is still maintained on it. Because it's in the Mikdash. And there could have been a mitzvah masa. So then you're back to where you started from. Why is it only all? Maybe Klishor. So the Rav needed to postulate that the mitzvah of Bakotev Yisrael is only chutz l'mikdash in order to make his teretz a valid teretz. Okay, say it. Now, as far as the second question is concerned, why the Rambam doesn't quote that in Mishnah Torah or the other places that the mitzvah is Kohanim or Levim or something like that. And he's really working very hard in Sefer mitzvahs to make it that it's Kohanim. So the answer to this is very clear. That according to the Rambam, and as the Rambam over here also, that the mitzvah of Aseh HaMishkan in Midbar al Yidei Levim was a Rashah of the Midbar. And that's according to the Rambam Shiur Shlishi, that the Lavalo Yavoid is only in Midbar. And that means that a Levi above the age of 50 is not allowed to be to do Nesias HaMishkan. And this whole thing was a Rashah for the time of the Mishkan. So, not only is the Masa Mishkan of Bakotef Yisol as opposed to the Aron a Rashah, but the need of Levi is also a Rashah. Okay, so that's what comes out. So, here it's the same. We have to talk about it as we go on. The conclusion is the same as Sefer HaMitzvos, that the Masa Levi is a Rashah, and L'Deres is not Levi. But the question is, what is it L'Deres? So comes the Rambam in Mishnah Torah and says that it could be anyone. And it's Sefer HaMitzvos here. He says it's Kohanim, but that's really irrelevant. The important point is that it's not Levi. And that's important for us. So conceptually, there's no difference between the Rambam Mishnah Torah and the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos. Okay. The Rav, as we pointed out, the mitzvah of Masa Aron, L'Deres, is an extension of the mitzvah Masa HaMishkan. And we'll see later, as time goes on, and probably not today, that the Ramban and Daniel Abavli and Rav Avram and Rambam seem to also work in that fashion and not the way the Brisker goes. The Rav, in his piece in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, does not in any way refer to the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos and doesn't discuss at all the mitzvah L'Deres being Aidei Kohanim or not. His discussion there is limited to Mishnah Torah, where the Ram doesn't quote that there's a Sis or an Aidei Kohanim. Now, We'll try to go through this one at a time, and we'll see what happens. The Grizz assumes that is working with the Pasha, the mitzvah of the Siyas Aron has no relation to the mitzvah of Masa Mishkan. Diametrically opposed to the Gross approach, and l'chera, where the Ramban goes, or the way the Nir Abavli and the Ravav Ben Rambam. According to Piskelov, the mitzvah of the Siyas HaMishkan was the mitzvah of the Shah, Aydei Levim. And the mitzvah of the Siyas HaAron is a separate mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of Deiris, Aydei Kohanim. And the lav lo yavoid oid is only said in the Siyas HaMishkan. And when there was no more in the Siyas HaMishkan, there's no more lav. And the lav was never said in the Siyas HaAron. Biskurov, which is a mitzvah days. Biskurov quotes as the source of the mitzvah of the Siyas HaAron, B'Kohanim, a new posik, and it's not shaykh to Mishkan. Boesahi in Devorim, Perek Yud Posik Ches, Hivdil Havaya, Es Shevet Halevi, Lo Seis Es Aroin Bris Havaya, Lamo Lifnei Havaya, L'Shosoi, Ulevorchoi, Ulevorch B'Shmo, Ara Yom Hazeh. Biskurov learns and takes the whole portion that Boesahi is talking about the last month of the sojourn of Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. And then it began the mitzvah of the Deiros in the Siyas HaAron. Biskurov, his interpretation of this pasuk is very odd, to say the least. According to Rashi and the Ramban and Chumash, Boesahi was after Chet HaEgel. According to the Ramban, in the first pshat, which is also like Rashi, that the Chet HaEgel, there was no chalukah bein Levim leKohanim, and Shevet Levi was Zerche in the Siyas HaAron, L'Shosai, Ulevorch B'Shmoi, because L'Shosai, Ulevorch B'Shmoi, there was no difference in Kohanim and Levim. Rashi, see, the question is, it says, L'Shosai, Ulevorch B'Shmoi. L'Shosai means the Ulevorch is talking about Pikas Kohanim. So, what happened? So, the Ramban says that there was no difference between Kohanim and Levim at that point, and everyone was the same. And the bracha and the avodah were all both Kohanim and Levim. We're talking about the very beginning of everything. But Rashi splits the pasuk up because it says, listen to the pasuk. Boisahi, Hivdil Havaya, Eshever Alevi, Losis Aloin, Bris Hashem. One. La'amoy Lifnei Havaya Lishosa. That's Avoid the Mikdosh. So Bis Ulevorach Bishmo. That's biggest Kohanim. So Biskarov says the same way the end of the pasuk is talking about Kohanim, the beginning is talking about Kohanim, and the Havdalah is about Kohanim. The Ramban says you're right; it's all talking about the same thing, but it's before the Havdalah from Kohen and Levi, and Kohen and Levi are the same. It's at the beginning, not at the end of the sojourn in the Midbar. Rashi splits the pasuk up. The beginning is Losis Aroin. Bris Hashem is talking about Levi, and that's the Hivdil. And at the end, it's talking about Kohanim. Lamoid lifnei Hashem l'shosai, ulevorach b'shmoi, ariyom hazeh. Now, according to, that's the first shot in the Ramban and the difference between Ramban and Rashi, the first shot. According to the second shot in Ramban, Kohanim of Bnei Kos are also moved on. Lo says Aaron. And according to the Ramban, Kohanim would noisen the Aron l'chatchila, mitchilas nesias hamishkon, but not b'teres kayin, b'teres b'nei kos. B'teres Levi. And the mitzvah was not only Aron, but it was the whole Mishkan. And there's no two mitzvahs. Everything is all one thing. It's Masa, Mishkan, and Aron. But the Aron was part of the Masa Mishkan. The Rambam, now, not only is the Biskarov a problem in Rashi and Aban Chumash? No. But it's against the Rambam and the Gemara also. The Rambam in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash V'Oivnei Boy learns from this pasuk B'Eisahi Bil Hashem Es Chelek Shevet HaLevi. This pasuk is talking about the Havdalah of Levim for Bnei Israel. So it's not talking about Kohanim at all. The Rambam Per Gimel Halacha Aleph of Klei HaMikdash V'Oivnei Boy Zer HaLevi Tuloi Muvdol L'Avodas HaMikdash Shenemar Boisahi Hivdil Havaya Eshevet HaLevi. Can't move foolish than that. It's an amazing letter. Chase, I don't know. And it's not that the Rambam is saying this like Yesh Ma'ayin. The Rambam is a Gemara Psachim. The Gemara Psachim, the foolish Gemara on Kuf Daled, Omid Aleph, that we learn from this pasuk that is Havdalah between Levim and Yisraelim. This is all against the Greece that this pasuk is talking about Kohanim. Also, so to add insult to injury, it's not only the Ramban and Rashi and Chumash. It's not only the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, which is based on the Gemara Psachim, but it's also a Gemara in Hoyes. The Gemara in Hoyes, and you Gimel of an Aleph, Tanya, Kol Mekudesh Mechaveroi, Koidim Lechaveroi, Levi Koidim LeYisrael, How do you know that Levi called in Israel? Atzol or whatever. Shenema, call him a Kudish. Shenema, Boesahi, Ivdel Hashem. Shever Levi, Los Zarun, Bris Hashem. So it's Mufurish also there. Not only Psuchim, but in Horiyos, they learn Beisahi is talking about the Havdalah of Levim. It's talking about Levim and not about Kohanim. Now, not only that, but the context of the pasuk is difficult. The pasuk after Boisahi says Al Kain loihoye lelevi chelik v'nachlo im echov Hashem unachlosay kasher diber Hashem elokecho loy, which is talking about the whole Shevet Levi. So the context of the pasuk is also talking about Levi, which is talking that Levi doesn't have nachlo in Eretz Yisrael. So one, okay, so this is difficult. What can I tell you? It's difficult. One could have asked, why does Bisklov have to quote this pasuk of Beisahi and get it all the chukim against this and against that and against whatever? Why does he quote a different pasuk? A pasuk in Dvorim. Lamed Aleph, pasuk Tes. The pasuk is like this. Vayichtov Moshe es Torah zeis, vayitno el kohanim b'nei Levi hanoisim es Aaron bris Havaya ve'al kol ziknei Yisrael. So it means that the kohanim are the noisei Aaron. So why do you quote this pasuk for the mitzvah? So the answer, l'cheira, the obvious answer is that the pasuk Kohanim b'nei Levi anoisim es Aaron is a description of who are the noisei Aaron. But there's no tzivoy to carry the Aaron. In the pasuk Beisahi Ivdel Hashem as Shever Alevi Loses es Aaron Bris Hashem, you could imagine that there's a tzivoy because Loses, the infinitive, is can be construed as a mitzvah. For example, we have a mitzvah la'ovdoi b'chol avavchem, that the verb of la'ovdoi, the Rambam mitzvah say hey says that it's a mitzvah. The infinitive could also be a mitzvah, but a description is not a mitzvah. You see, Biskurov, he can't learn that Nesias Ha'olam B'Kotef from the pasuk in Gabulis HaKodesh Aleim B'Kotef Yisol, because this pasuk was said in Nesias HaMishkan, and according to him, it's a separate mitzvah. It's another mitzvah. So he can't. So according to the Rav and the others, that because it's all the same mitzvahs, he can do it. So therefore, he needed a separate makor, or he needed badim, and he needed the raya of a mitzvah masa from Beis Ha'i, Loses. And when he quotes badim, it says Reve says abadim betabos Listen to this. How do you know from Badim there's a mitzvah of Masa? Because it says, it's referring to over here, in Shmos, Chofhei, Posik Yudal Tezvov, Ve'ves es abadim batabos, al tsalis ha'oroin, lo says is ha'oroin bohem, but tabas ha'oroin, yiyu abadim, lo yesuru mimenu. But what are the purpose of the badim? It says Mefurish in Torah that the purpose of the badim is for masa ha'oroin. And it's a lavle deis of asos abadim. Lo yesu mimenu. So it must be that the mitzvah masa is a mitzvah deis. You can't derive there's a mitzvah for that unless you learn losses as ha'oloin bohem. That's a mitzvah. But the pasuk is only a lav. Piskelov doesn't discuss what the interaction between the two psukim are. He quotes both. He quotes Beisahi and he quotes Badim. Mitzvah Badim. So it could be you learn Beisahi, there's a mitzvah to see or Kohanim, and from Badim you learn that Nesiya is Bakotef. Because we really don't know from Beisahi, it doesn't say Kotef. Beisahi, Hivla Hashem, Eshever Alevi. Lo says, as I want to business say how you carry it. But in the posting of Badim, it talks about Kotef. It says in the posting of Badim, it says, Lo says, outside, Lo says, Vayves es abadim betabos, outside is Oren, Lo says it's Oren bohem. So what do you mean? You have to carry it with the Badim. So the assumption, I assume, but I have to know if that's true, that the Badim had to be on the shoulders. Maybe they carried it with their hands. So you have to know exactly if this is true or not. Secondly, finally with this, he quotes that the fact that there's a Siyas Aron on the second Aron is the Charaya that the mitzvah Masa Aron is independent of Mishkan, because the second Aron wasn't part of Mishkan as a mitzvah Masa. If the mitzvah is a mitzvah Mishkan, there's no mitzvah on the second Aron. Going to Piskelov, the mitzvah is different. The mitzvah of Masa Aron L'Deres is different than the mitzvah of Mishkan, of the Siyas HaMishkan. Correct, that's what we said again and again. But the Sefer HaMitzvos, it's just mefurish the opposite, that the mitzvah is a hemshich of the mitzvah Masa Mishkan. And he quotes the part. He says the pasuk is nilmad. The mitzvah is nilmad. Also, I guess the Mishnah Torah pasuk is nilmad from the pasuk. Or the same pasuk of Masa B'nei when they cost lo nosan ki avodas hakadosh aleim bakoti yisol, which the pasuk of the Siyas HaMishkan. And according to the Rambam, the mefurish even more, because the change from Levim to Kohanim was only for me Kohanim, but Lechatchila also should have been Kohanim. So it means that there was a mute in Kohanim at Tchilas Yimei HaMidbar, but not because the mitzvah ches, according to the skill of the whole thing doesn't make any sense. Kohanim are about Aron, and Mishkan is about Levim. Okay, next. Good. Now, I just want to leave this to you. And this is Hashem, pick this up. You see, if you read the Pasuk in Chumash, Ka'avodas HaKodesh Aleim B'Kotef Yisrael, is the reason why they weren't given Agolis. But how do you know there's a mitzvah? How do you know it's a mitzvah? It only says, it's telling you a story. And the amazing thing, the Ram learns out from this story that there's a mitzvah. Vayoyim Hashem el Moshe leimo, kach meitom, v'hoyu la'avoid es avodas oil moed, v'nosata oisom el levim ish kefi avoidosai. Vayikach Moshe es agolos, v'es aboko, v'yiten oisom el levim. V'nei kohos lo inosom, ki avodas HaKodesh aleim b'kotiv Yisrael. So B'kotiv Yisrael is a sipur why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't give the agolos to B'nei kohos. So I found this kasha. Rabbi Yochanan Perlo also asked this question in his Biur Sefer HaMitzvos of Rav Sadigoin, Lavim Loisase Yud Beis, Loisase Reish Yud Beis, Reish Yud Gimel, Reish Yud Dalet. Amit Hashem, we'll pick up the teretz to this next week, Bli Neder.